come out with, before going into a contract, before going into a bid for a particular contract, all these issues need to be specified upfront.
When you say dynamic oversight, you're essentially referring to an independent authority of sorts. That's my presumption. So there are two questions there. You're obviously referring to an independent authority of sorts. 3P is what the finance minister spoke about in the budget. When will we see that coming, and is that what you're referring to? And also, sir, I think Mr. Kelkar spoke about yesterday how renegotiation should be allowed even after the contract. He didn't say it so explicitly, but that is the kind of inference that we draw. My question is that isn't there a lot of subjectivity involved, and how do you do it transparently? There can't be an ideal way to do it.
You see, transparency is the key. After all, we are accountable to the government, is accountable to the public, government is accountable to the parliament, right. And the accountability of the government is, as you know, it sort of goes to various doorsteps. Accountability is therefore of prime importance. Now, yes, there will be an element of subjectivity, but then it has to be very, very minimal, and it has to be quantified upfront. In other words, if government agrees finally to provide a mechanism or a provision for renegotiation, then what should be the triggers for those renegotiation? They have to be spelled out upfront. It cannot be left for interpretation to be done at a later date. Right at the beginning, we have to say that in the event of this taking place, these events taking place, there should be flexibility, there should be renegotiation. And then the broad parameters of renegotiation also has to be fixed, where the delay is on the part of the public authority. The authority has to take a slight haircut. Where the delay is on the part of the private developer, naturally he has to take a haircut. Now, all these things will have to be addressed upfront, quantified, specified.
I want to specifically draw your attention to contract reinforcement. We rank very poorly even in the World Bank listing as far as that one parameter is concerned, and a lot of private and international players believe that India just doesn't respect contracts at one level. There is a very big brotherly attitude on the part of the government, which I'm presuming you will want to change. My question goes beyond that. Contract reinforcement is very good, but is that possible given how much litigation there is in public-private partnerships, and without the adequate judicial reforms, can you really achieve that?
You see, with regard to contract enforcement, it's a continuous process. We are always trying to improve upon it. But I think once you provide for adequate room for dealing with unforeseen situations, most of the contractual issues will get resolved then and there through some kind of a mechanism which has to be probably considered by the government. And so therefore, we are working towards a situation where the contractual disputes are minimized, and also it is very important to have, under PPP projects, to have a contract where both are equal partners, the public authority as well as the private participant, the private investor. They should be equal, there should be equality of, equal allocation of, equal and appropriate allocation of risks, and there should be equal partners.
I also want to draw your attention to something that a lot of the participants in the PPP, at least in the private sector space, seem to suggest. They said there needs to be a review of the assessment that banks do. That is one opinion, and the expert opinion on this is actually banks are doing something that they're not adequately supposed to do, which is infra lending that should be done by term lending institutions like the likes of IFCI or IFCL. Is that something that merits or finds favor in your mind as you look at reworking and recontouring the PPP model?
You see, in our country, we have tried the experiment of development financial institutions. Then we have some of the development financial institutions in the past and recently also have moved from being development financial or infrastructure finance institutions to banks, and then from banks, there has been to and fro movement depending on how the prevailing situation was. But if it's an exclusive development financial institution, it requires a lot of long-term access, access to long-term funds. Now, that the financial institutions probably are finding it difficult, and I don't see anything wrong in the banks addressing banks dealing with infrastructure projects. What is very important is that the banks, when they do a long-term lending, there could be an asset liability mismatch.
That's right, yes.
Now that can be addressed by providing mechanism for takeout financing, and for takeout financing, number of experiments, number of innovative measures have been taken. And that will be another area also where we will have to strengthen the mechanism for takeout financing. I would not see anything wrong in banks lending for infrastructure projects or banks appraising infrastructure projects. But yes, sometimes there should be minimum number of banks financing a particular project, and it should not be crowded out by a large number of banks financing a small project or a medium-sized project.
Also, the other big question, sir, is that a lot of people believe that the right and the ideal way to go forward with the PPP model is that you have a very well-prepared, well-planned project. Let the government get all the adequate clearances and then rope in the private sector, because a lot of the delays happen on account of land acquisition or they happen on account of forest, environment clearances. Is that something that also merits a rethink, you think?
No, it is very important. It is very important to get the land acquisition in place, to get the environmental clearances in place. Land acquisition issues normally once about 70%, particularly let's take the case of road projects. Once about 70% of the land acquisition is complete, and if land acquisition, the remaining land acquisition is not going to be a big problem, then we take a call whether we can go ahead with the project. But you are absolutely right. The various regulatory clearances and permissions will have to be in place before we bring in the developer, because otherwise delays will cause again disputes relating to the contract.
And I think developers will perhaps be interested to invest if they have the adequate clearances in place. I also want to ask you a more, admin-related question. 8.8 lakh crores worth of stalled projects is what we are staring at. Of course, a lot of the recommendations that have come in will perhaps need executive action, but there will perhaps be some legislative changes that will be required. What is the way forward with these recommendations? Will we see them find place in the union budget? How do things proceed from here on?
See, I cannot conjecture at this stage. We are going through the report. And based on, then we will examine the report in consultation with the connected ministries, and then the decisions will be taken. Now, what will go into the budget and whether it will go into the budget is a budget issue. I would not like to comment. But decisions which can be taken quickly will be taken quickly. It will not be delayed, or we will not wait for the budget. For budget, there will be many more issues which will come up. So depending on the nature of the issue, whether it's an administrative decision to be required or it's a decision which requires legislative backing, depending on that, the roadmap for implementation will be prepared. But something, as I said again, something which can be implemented right away or quickly or in the short term, government will go ahead and do that.
So what you're essentially suggesting is that the executive decisions can perhaps be taken in the short term. Something like the amendment of the NHAI Act 1998 may take a longer while, and you can do that at a later stage. Is that what you're essentially suggesting?
No, I am not suggesting anything. All that I am saying is that we will go through the report, and depending on the nature of the recommendation which is found acceptable by the government will move forward.
Honestly speaking, sir, this Friday morning, do you expect public-private partnerships to be revigored with this one recommendation and its implementation alone? Have enough enabling environment been cleared around that?
No, let me mention that apart from this report which has come, in the ministry, in the finance ministry, we are holding a lot of consultations with stakeholders. Other ministries like the road transport and highways, the railways, the shipping, all these ministries are also interacting with their sectoral stakeholders. So there is a lot of inputs available in the government, and all these will have to be put together, synthesized and taken forward. Now, with regard to, you asked about whether I am hopeful. We are making a very sincere and very strong effort to see that this PPP sector is revived, because that can make a huge contribution to the investment for infrastructure projects.
Mr. Das, while you get a big thumbs up for the PPP projects, I can't let you go this Friday morning without speaking to you about what the market seem to be losing some sleep over, and that is, of course, the 7th Pay Commission report. They believe that too much allocation needs to be done for that. They believe this is perhaps going to deter you from your path of fiscal consolidation. First up, 1.02 lakh crore rupees is a lot of money, given how this is almost a 6 to a 7 time increase over what the 6th Pay Commission had recommended, and that was an outgo of just about 17,000 odd crore rupees.
You see, the report of the Pay Commission will be examined by the Department of Expenditure in Finance Ministry, and there is a mechanism in place in government to examine it.
But you manage the government's finances, so it's an appropriate question to be asked to you.
So I will not go into the details of the Pay Commission recommendation. With regard to its impact on the overall fiscal, let me mention that the report of the Pay Commission, the fact that there will be a Pay Commission report which will be presented to the government during the course of this financial year, it's not something which was which was not unknown.
That's
It
right.
was known. We knew that a report was coming, and government always makes a likely estimate of what is going to be the impact. After considering all this, the roadmap, the the fiscal consolidation, the fiscal roadmap was spelled out by the finance minister in the current year's budget. So therefore, we are optimistic, we are confident that the fiscal roadmap will be maintained. 3.9% this year we have taken, the finance minister, the government has taken a slight, slight expansion
Right.
in this year's fiscal numbers. And instead of 2 years time frame, we are now achieving the target. We now
3
target
years.
to achieve in 3 years. So we have undertaken a slight expansion in the current year, mainly for infrastructure projects. The emphasis on infrastructure will continue, obviously, because that is a key to our economic, that is a key economic driver. But we are confident that the fiscal deficit numbers will be maintained, and it's a budgetary exercise. We will deal with it as we go closer to the budget.
I'll tell you why people are losing sleep over. People believe that the FRBM target for next fiscal is 3.5%. Your money on account of OROP has also come in. There is going to be expansion on account of the pay commission as well. And perhaps crude from here is going to turn on. You have been very lucky and you've got this windfall gain from crude. That may not stay so benign, and which is why markets expect you to breach that fiscal deficit. In fact, some reports seem to suggest it's not going to be at 3.5% next fiscal, but may actually end up at 3.9%. How confident are you of achieving the target next fiscal, given the kind of things that I just spoke about?
You see, we always internally have a risk matrix. Things can go either way. I mean, the crude prices, some people project that it will even go below 40, below 30.
Yes.
People are talking about it. There are people who talk exactly the opposite. So, but internally we have a risk matrix. But if something totally unforeseen happens, then that is something for which you cannot plan. You have to deal with it if such a situation happens. Now, having said that, let me mention, I would like to again reiterate, the fact that a pay commission report was coming was known to the government. Government had considered all these aspects, and accordingly a roadmap for fiscal
So had the
deficit
entire
had been...
1.02 lakh crore rupees been budgeted for?
No, I wouldn't say that, because we do not know, we did not know, government obviously did not know what the recommendation should be. Now that the recommendations have come, we will have to rework our numbers. We have to work closely on our numbers for next year's budget, and we will deal with the situation. But I can assure you that the fiscal target for next year, certainly it will be our endeavor to achieve it, and I am quite sure we will be able to achieve it.
You're sounding sure there. The markets are a little worried, but I will ask you a question which pertains to government's capital expenditure. The reason that you let the fiscal expand and you've delayed attaining the 3% target is because you wanted to invest in capital expenditure, something that you've been doing. Experts believe that this report and OROP will perhaps constrain and restrict your ability to do so. Do you see that fear perhaps gaining ground here in Finance Ministry?
No, it's again the same question. I mean, you are putting in a slightly different manner.
I'm just trying to get a headline out of you here.
But as I said it, that the fiscal deficit roadmap, the fiscal consolidation roadmap, we will work on that roadmap to achieve those targets.
One of the things that Justice Mathur said yesterday was that it should boom consumption. The idea also is to boost consumption. Do you expect consumption to be boosted on account of higher wages for many government employees, pensioners? That's question number one. And question number two is, a lot of people question that should India continue to focus on the consumption-led growth that we have seen in the past? Should we not move away from that, desist consumption for a while and talk about the investment-led growth model?
See, naturally, more money in the hands of larger section of people will mean more of consumption. But also it means more of savings. So when there is more money in the hands of the, when there is more disposable income in the hands of the people, it will lead to higher consumption. It will lead also to higher savings. Both are good in their own way. And we are not looking at a consumption-driven growth. Let me make it very clear. It will boost consumption, the Pay Commission recommendations. But government is not looking at a consumption-led growth. Government is looking at a investment-led growth, both domestic investment as well as foreign investment. So far as domestic investment is concerned, the focus has been on improving the ease of doing business, in making, sort of funds available through to the various kinds of projects, and PPP, this report is one effort. With regard to bringing in the foreign investments, as you are aware, the FDI regime has been liberalized to a massive extent. I mean, that's the right word to use it. So it has been greatly relaxed and it has been liberalized in the over the last, about a week or 10 days ago.
Yeah.
So therefore, government believes in investment-led growth, and the government emphasis will be in that direction.
How many more quarters before you see the private sector investment begin to break ground? I mean, there are many reasons why they're not investing, and ease of doing business is just one of them. They're sitting on, they're very, very over leveraged. They're sitting on over capacities. By when do you see the cycle turn for private sector investment in India? Are we still a few quarters away, you believe?
See, government is taking the right decisions. Whatever changes are required to be done in policy, with regard to other measures, government is taking all the right decisions, and there is no delay with regard to any of the decisions. Now it's for the private sector to respond. We have opened up the FDI gates have also been opened up substantially. So far as the private sector is concerned, we are addressing their issues here, within the country we are addressing. Like, for example, the problem encountered by the DISCOMs.
That's right.
In the power sector.
Yes.
Government has dealt with that issue also. Several measures have been taken in the road sector also to deal with the stuck projects, stalled projects in the road sector.
So by doing all of that, when do you expect the cycle of investment to revive for the private sector?
I think it should happen. Time has come because the decisions have been taken over the last 1.5 years. Obviously, you can't expect results in 6 months or 8 months. But now that government has taken a lot of decisions, I think it should happen. It should happen. Now, when, I would not like to say whether this quarter or next quarter, but I think we are looking for 2016 to be a better year in terms of investment.
Very quickly, sir, I have a last question to ask of you. The gold monetization scheme was launched with much fanfare. We are given to understand the response hasn't been as expected. Would you like to share with us what has the response been like, and what would you do to boost investment in that space?
You see, the gold monetization scheme is a continuing scheme. It's not a scheme which starts today and ends on a particular day. It's a continuing scheme. Initially, as we explained right at the beginning, there are certain limitations with regard to the testing centers, which are currently restricted to, about 20 centers across the country. We are constantly in touch with the Jewelers Association, we are in touch with the BIS, and we are now expanding the network of testing centers. There are about nearly 13,000 jewelers, and we are going to call for their expression of interest to get their willingness to act as testing centers. Then they will be put through the necessary process of diligence. But gold monetization scheme, I would expect lot of bulk gold held by various charitable institutions and trusts, that to come in. And that naturally the big holders of gold would like to study the scheme, which they are doing. The banks are in touch with all these institutions and organizations which possess a lot of gold. They are discussing with them. They will take that decision. It is just about 15 days that the scheme was launched. It's a continuing scheme. Whatever corrections are required in the scheme, we are proactively engaged with the various stakeholders, and we are taking necessary measures to see that all these whatever issues are there are resolved then and there.
Mr. Das, I'm sure investors and stakeholders in Indian economy will be happy to hear this interview, considering there's a lot of reassurance that comes on investments. That's the Department of Economic Affairs Secretary Shaktikanta Das in exclusive conversation here with ET Now, essentially talking about the PPP model and, of course, the Finance Commission report, the fears thereof. Some of them have been assuaged.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.